In my last video, I identified Laban, the uncle of Jacob, as history's first con man. I got some comments asking me, what about Jacob himself? Didn't he deceive his father to steal the blessing from his brother Esau? Why isn't he the world's first con man? It's a good question. And a proper study of this question would require us to spend an hour going into the complexities of biblical Hebrew. We're not going to do that. Let me give you this short summary. In the book of Malachi, the prophet says in the name of God, I hated Esau. I made his mountains a desolation and heritage for desert serpents. If Esau were just a victim of Jacob's treachery, why would God hate him? Clearly, Esau was a contemptible character. But how does that excuse Jacob's deception? The first clue is that upon discovering that deception, what is Isaac's reaction? You would expect him to be furious with anger. But instead, what does he say? He says to Esau, your brother came and took your blessing by stealth, and he will be blessed. He doesn't condemn Jacob. He reaffirms that the blessing is his. The second clue is that initially, Rebekah, the mother of both Jacob and Esau, was the mastermind of this scheme. And despite Jacob's protestations, she insisted that he go through with it. The third clue is that when Jacob was about to depart from home to find a wife, his father Isaac gives him another blessing. Well, if Jacob always intended to give Isaac a blessing of his own, what was the point? What was the need to steal the blessing of Esau? So let's start at the end and work our way backwards. What was this second blessing, the one that Isaac gave to Jacob right before he departed? He said to him, may God grant you the blessing of Abraham to you and to your offspring after you. What does that mean? The blessing of Abraham was the blessing to succeed in the spiritual mission that would define the Jewish people. The mission that had started with Abraham, continued through Isaac, and was being handed on to his children. That was the blessing for spiritual devotion, spiritual sensitivity, and uplifted purpose. Well, then, what was the blessing for Esau? That blessing was, may God give you the dew of the heavens and the fat of the land. It was a blessing for material prosperity, for physical wealth and success. And the original plan, according to the rabbinic literature, was that Jacob and Isaac would be partners. Jacob would be involved in spiritual support, spiritual pursuits. Esau would support him in that mission, and together they would form an exalted partnership. Together they would carry on the mission and the legacy of their grandfather and their father. But what Rebekah saw was that Esau had no intention of fulfilling this mission. He was going to take the blessings of prosperity and use them for self-serving purposes, not to support his brother. And if that happened, if he got that blessing, that means that Jacob would not have any means of support. He wouldn't be able to succeed in the spiritual mission because there would be no material foundation on which he could build his spiritual success. And that's why Rebekah said to Jacob, you have to go in. You have to deceive your father. You have to get that blessing. And the fascinating thing is that after Isaac recognizes that he's been deceived, what is his reaction? He says, oh, this was the right thing. In that moment, he recognizes that if the innocent, pure, guileless Jacob could deceive him, how much more so the crafty hunter of Esau? He realizes that he was about to make a catastrophic mistake that would have undermined and destroyed the mission that he had inherited from his father and was trying to pass on to his children. Jacob has to do the whole thing himself. But there's a profound lesson in this for us. Imagine if you saw someone you loved deeply, someone you cared about to make a catastrophic mistake, something that would be devastating, have devastating repercussions. Would you not feel it was your moral obligation to try to stop them from making that mistake, even if you had to resort to deception? It's a dangerous game because we have so many biases and ulterior motives. We can convince ourselves to do things that we're not meant to do, but sometimes you have to resort to means that you might not want to under ordinary circumstances because it's the only way of preventing a disaster. Now, this does not mean that the ends justify the means, but when it's life or death, certainly for an individual, and all the more so on a national, a global, a universal level, sometimes this is the cost of living in a corrupt world. We want to be ethical. We want to stay pure to our values, but we have to deal with the realities of life. And that's going to create a tension that we have to deal with. It's important to remember that very often what is best in the long run feels terrible in the short run. How we navigate that is why we need an ethical outlook, because we're going to face those challenges. It's why we have to balance the intellect and the emotion, because neither one alone is completely reliable. But if we're sincere, if we listen to the voice of reason and we listen to our hearts, and we reconcile those two voices, we have a much better chance of staying on the straight path that will lead us to a life of ethics, of material success, and of spiritual purpose and mission.